12 top consultants fail, but one overlooked janitor with a mop in hand and a mind like a scalpel cracks the code in under a minute, shaking an entire industry to its core. The glass towers of Linther Dynamics gleamed under the morning sun, a company celebrated for its innovation, now buckling under the weight of a problem no one could solve. Inside the polished boardroom, anxiety hung in the air. The leadership team, dressed in tailored suits and clinging to expensive coffees, was exhausted. 12 elite consultants had come and gone over the past month, charging astronomical fees and offering theories, frameworks, and models, but none provided a working solution. The problem? A critical software optimization system that powered every major operation in the logistics department had malfunctioned. Productivity was down 70%. Clients were pulling contracts. Stockholders were threatening to withdraw. People whispered that the company was cursed. Others blamed sabotage. But the truth was simpler and more brutal. No one knew what was wrong. Not the engineers, not the data scientists, not the consultants flown in from 4 continents, and certainly not the management, whose Ivy League credentials now felt as useful as wet paper. Every day during the crisis, a quiet figure swept the marble floors, emptied trash bins, and wiped fingerprints off the glass doors. His name was Carl Hendricks, a 58-year-old janitor with weathered dark brown skin, graying hair tucked under a navy cap, and deep, thoughtful eyes. He wore a faded maintenance uniform with his name stitched in cursive red thread on the breast. His face held a calm expression that contrasted starkly with the frantic energy of the office. Carl never spoke unless spoken to. Most executives didn't even know his name. To them, he was part of the furniture, functional, invisible, beneath notice. But Carl had been listening. Listening with the sharp ear of a man who'd grown up solving problems with scraps and salvage, who spent nights reading technical manuals left in the recycling bins, who'd once built a solar-powered heater for his house out of soda cans and wires. And now, as consultants and executives ran in circles, Carl had a nagging idea forming in his head. Senior VP Eleanor Griggs, a sharp 42-year-old woman in a crisp gray blazer with high heels clicking like gunshots, slammed her tablet on the boardroom table. "This is insane," she snapped. "We've brought in experts from MIT, Stanford, and Berlin Tech. We're hemorrhaging money. If we don't fix this in 72 hours, we lose the Polaris contract." Silence fell. People looked everywhere but at each other. That's when assistant manager Donnie, a jittery 27-year-old in an ill-fitting suit, mumbled, "There's one guy we haven't asked." Everyone turned. "Who?" Eleanor barked. He hesitated, then pointed toward the hallway window. "Carl. The janitor. I overheard him muttering something about the core logic glitch yesterday. I thought it was weird, but laughter erupted, nervous, disbelieving laughter. "You want to bring in the janitor?" said a consultant. "What's next? Ask the vending machine for ideas." Eleanor didn't laugh. Her eyes narrowed. "Bring him in." Carl was summoned. He entered the room with steady steps, pushing his cart aside and adjusting the brim of his cap. The room went silent. 12 people in $1,000 suits turned their skeptical eyes toward a man in scuffed work boots and a faded uniform. Carl looked at them all, then at the screen displaying lines of complex code and system metrics. His eyes flicked over the blinking error messages. He scratched his chin. Eleanor broke the silence. "Carl, we're in a crisis. If you have anything, even a theory, we'd like to hear it." Carl's voice was calm, measured. "You all been looking at the code like it's the problem, but the code's just the echo." They blinked. He stepped forward, uninvited, and tapped the screen. "There's a loop in the system that's calling an obsolete protocol. The system's not broken. It's stuck in a feedback cycle." "How do you know that?" one of the consultants asked, incredulous. Carl shrugged. "Read your manual when I was cleaning. Same thing happened to a furnace relay once in my uncle's shop. Logic ain't always complex." A stunned hush took hold of the boardroom as Carl gently tapped a few keys on the console. Everyone watched, motionless, as he navigated the interface like someone who had done it 1,000 times before. His fingers moved with certainty, bypassing the bloated UI layers the consultants had obsessively documented. Carl paused for a moment, his deep dark brown hands resting over the keyboard. Then, without flourish, he ran a basic diagnostic, one the experts had apparently overlooked. The screen flickered, logs unspooled. The obsolete loop was exposed. Carl entered a single line of code to disable the feedback call. Then he clicked execute. The room fell into silence. 1 second, 2, then, as if exhaling, the mainframe light shifted from red to green. The screen flashed. System restored. Carl stepped back, face neutral. "That should do it," he said quietly, adjusting his faded cap. 12 consultants stared at the screen. One swore under his breath. Another rubbed his forehead like waking from a bad dream. Eleanor looked like she might cry, not from despair but relief or disbelief. In less than 1 minute, the janitor had solved the problem 12 top-tier consultants couldn't fix in 4 weeks. The aftermath of Carl's fix was heavier than celebration. It was embarrassment. The consultants started gathering their laptops with shaky hands, mumbling about system limitations and rare edge cases. But their voices were hollow. No one was listening. Their reports, jargon, and frameworks now looked like overcomplicated nonsense. One consultant tried to speak up. Of course, we were narrowing in on that protocol issue too. But the sentence withered under Eleanor's glare. The boardroom, once buzzing with intellectual arrogance, now felt like a classroom where the teacher had caught everyone cheating. Carl stood off to the side, expression unreadable. He didn't look proud, he didn't look smug, just calm, like a man who fixed a leak or replaced a fuse. Like it was all just another task. Someone finally broke the silence. Why didn't anyone listen to him sooner? Because no one had asked. Because no one imagined the janitor had anything useful to say. Word spread through Linther Dynamics like a wildfire. The janitor fixed the system in under a minute, after 12 consultants failed. At first, people laughed it off as exaggeration. But the IT logs confirmed it. Meeting transcripts confirmed it. The CEO himself reviewed the incident and was stunned. Soon, employees were whispering in break rooms and Slack channels. How could they all miss it? How could he see it? More importantly, how many other Carls were being ignored? Departments started looking at their floor staff differently. Engineers started greeting janitors. Managers began questioning the hierarchy they had always trusted. Carl, meanwhile, returned to his duties. He didn't give interviews. He didn't accept praise. When asked by a journalist about the incident, he said simply, "Sometimes the person with the answer just doesn't look the part." That night, Eleanor Griggs sat alone in her office staring at her ceiling. Her carefully organized world had been rattled. She replayed the moment Carl diagnosed the problem in her mind again and again. Not just the moment of revelation, but the 100 moments before it when she had passed him in the hallway without a second thought. She opened the company's org chart and stared at it like a relic from a fallen empire. She realized she had built a fortress, one made of degrees, positions, and seniority, but it was full of blind spots. Carl had exposed more than a bug in the system. He had revealed a fracture in how the company thought, hired, and listened. She made a decision. The next morning, Eleanor proposed a radical new initiative to the executive board. The initiative was called Operation Flatten, a cross-hierarchy collaboration system aimed at gathering insights from every level of the company, from executives to janitors, drivers, cafeteria staff, and security guards. It was met with confusion and resistance. Are we really supposed to take input from people who don't even have a technical background? One senior engineer asked. Eleanor looked him dead in the eye. We already did, and it saved the company. Reluctantly, they approved a 6-week pilot program. Departments were required to host open forums every Friday where any employee could present ideas, raise concerns, or offer problem-solving insights, no matter their role. It was chaos at first. But something unexpected happened in week 3. Someone from warehouse logistics proposed a loading algorithm that shaved 11% off delivery costs. They weren't just listening to Carl anymore. They were finally learning the language of untapped potential. Until now, Carl's background had been a mystery. But in the wake of his accidental fame, curious co-workers began digging deeper. What they found shocked them. Carl Hendricks had once been a systems analyst for a mid-sized tech firm in Ohio. He had no degree, but he was self-taught, devouring manuals and building prototypes from scratch. When that company folded, Carl bounced between jobs, always overlooked for positions requiring formal education. At one point, he had applied for an entry-level IT role at Linther Dynamics. He had never received a callback, so he took the janitor position instead. He needed to feed his family, and he never stopped learning. Every night he stayed after his shift, studying whatever technical printouts he found. Not because he had to, but because he loved solving problems. Now, the same people who had once ignored his resume were debating how to promote him. The following Monday, a unique meeting took place in the Linther Dynamics Innovation Lab. There were no ties, no suits, no nameplates or seating charts, just folding chairs and name stickers. Eleanor personally invited employees from all departments: janitors, cafeteria workers, night security, delivery drivers, receptionists. Carl was there too, still wearing his faded blue uniform and work boots, his gray cap slightly tilted, his dark brown skin creased by years of labor and learning. His expression remained thoughtful and humble as always. Each person was invited to speak freely. not in a brainstorming gimmick but as true equals, and the ideas flowed. A 63-year-old parking lot guard shared an idea that would later reduce employee commute stress by 30%. A 19-year-old mailroom clerk proposed a faster internal document routing system. The hierarchy had melted, and the intelligence that had long been buried under job titles was suddenly in bloom. Carl, quiet as ever, simply listened, but now, people listened to him too. When Linther's CEO, Malcolm Wexler, a tall, silver-haired executive known for being aloof, heard about the flattening experiment's early success, he flew back from Geneva immediately. He watched recordings of Carl's fix, read every report, even interviewed Carl himself. In a closed-door executive session, Malcolm made an uncharacteristic move. He apologized. "I built this company on the assumption that brilliance always came wrapped in a degree and a tailored suit," he said. "But I was wrong. Our greatest innovation in years came from a man pushing a mop." He announced that from now on Linther Dynamics would implement cognitive diversity indexing, not just tracking demographic representation, but the inclusion of diverse thinking from across job roles. It wasn't charity, it was survival, and Carl Hendricks was appointed to lead the pilot program. Carl didn't want recognition. He didn't ask for a new role, but the company offered it anyway. Lead Systems Observer, a newly created title with full access to every department and a generous compensation package. At first, Carl declined. "I'm just a janitor," he said softly. Eleanor replied, "No, Carl, you're the reason this company didn't collapse. You were always more than that. We just didn't see it." Carl eventually accepted, not for the money, but to keep doing what he loved, fixing what was broken, and more importantly, helping others learn how to see what no one else saw. But he never stopped wearing his old uniform. Not out of pride or protest, but as a reminder, to himself and to everyone, where wisdom can come from. Word of Carl's story spread beyond Linther's walls. Business magazines ran headlines. "The janitor who outsmarted the experts," and corporate wisdom turned upside down. Universities debated his case in management classes. Think tanks held panels about cognitive bias in hierarchical systems. Podcasts dissected every angle, from the failings of consultancy culture to the power of practical intelligence. Some dismissed it as a fluke, but many companies began reevaluating how they defined talent. Suddenly, HR departments started asking, "Are we hiring titles, or are we hiring minds?" Carl had unwittingly launched a movement. He never raised his voice. He never asked for fame. All he did was quietly do what no one else could and make people question why. Inside Linther, something else began to change. Employees who had once felt invisible now walked the halls with heads held higher. The cafeteria manager started proposing efficiency models. A security guard designed an app to log equipment failures. Departments created cross-level idea boards. Interns sat in on R&D meetings. And the Friday open forums became the most anticipated hour of the week. It wasn't perfect. Some executives resisted. Old habits die hard, but the change was real, and it was spreading, because once people saw that a janitor could save a company, they couldn't unsee it. The consulting firms who had failed to solve the issue reacted poorly. Some tried to reframe the narrative, arguing they had softened the ground for Carl's discovery. Others mocked the company's direction, calling it naive idealism. But behind closed doors, panic set in. Clients were now asking harder questions. Some began requesting direct access to lower-level employees during site visits. Others paused contracts entirely. The illusion had cracked. Carl's simple act had exposed something uncomfortable. That the consulting elite could be outperformed by someone without an MBA, someone who cleaned their floors. A year later, Carl gave a talk at a national conference on organizational design. He walked onto the stage in his old uniform. Some laughed nervously, others sat up straight. He began, "I'm not here to talk about code, I'm here to talk about listening." He spoke about how assumptions bury truth, how titles blind us, how we miss gold because it's covered in grease. He challenged leaders to stop filtering ideas by source and start evaluating them by value. By the end, the room was standing. Carl never raised his voice once. Inspired by Linther's transformation, several major corporations launched similar programs. Airlines invited flight attendants into engineering review sessions. Hospitals began letting janitors sit in on infection control audits. Even government agencies took notice. Carl's story became part of training manuals, TED Talks, and MBA curriculum. But the most powerful change wasn't in institutions. It was in people. People who had been told they were just something, just a cleaner, just a clerk, just a driver, started to believe they had something to offer. and often they did. Carl never changed much. He still rode the bus to work, still read technical journals at night, still spent his breaks chatting with the same coworkers. But the world around him had changed. One afternoon, a young intern approached him nervously and said, "I used to think I had to wait to be heard, until I heard about you." Carl smiled. He didn't need a statue. He didn't need a title. He had something better, a legacy of humility, insight, and transformation that echoed far beyond polished floors and blinking screens. The story of Carl Hendricks isn't just about one man fixing one system. It's about what happens when we stop assuming that intelligence wears a tie, when we stop believing that wisdom only lives in glass offices, when we finally realize that the best ideas can come from the break room just as often as the boardroom. Carl didn't save a company with a theory. He saved it with vision, courage, and clarity born from experience. So ask yourself, who are you not listening to? And more importantly, what might they know that you don't? If this story moved you, if you believe more people need to hear it, don't forget to subscribe. There are more voices like Carl's waiting to be heard.